April 28, 1988. On this day, a horrifying aviation disaster shocked everyone. Suddenly, at 24,000 feet, the roof of a plane tore apart, and the aircraft began to plummet toward the earth. What happened next? Let's find out. It was April the 28th, and as usual, Hilo International Airport in Hawaii was bustling with passengers. Around 1 p.m., Aloha Airlines Flight 243, a Boeing 737, was preparing for takeoff. This plane had been flying short trips between various Hawaiian islands throughout the day. Since morning, it had already completed 3 successful takeoffs and landings. Normally, a thorough inspection is conducted before the day's first flight, but on this 4th flight, that step was skipped. In the cockpit were Captain Robert Schornsteimer and First Officer Mimi Tompkins. Captain Robert had 8,500 flight hours of experience, and Mimi had approximately 8,000. Along with 5 crew members, a total of 90 passengers boarded Flight 243. At about 1:25 p.m., the plane departed Hilo Airport. The journey to Kahului Airport, located on Maui, was supposed to last just 35 minutes. Remarkably, this aircraft had been operating for 19 years, completing over 90,000 flights in a humid, salt-laden environment. A grueling record that had undoubtedly taken its toll. About 20 minutes after takeoff, a flight attendant began serving tea, coffee, and snacks. Most passengers still wore their seatbelts since the plane was still stabilizing at cruising altitude. Everything seemed normal, but at around 1:48 p.m., a sudden violent bang shook the aircraft. It felt as if something had forcefully yanked the plane from behind, leaving the pilots stunned. First Officer Mimi turned around, and what she saw was terrifying. The cockpit door and an 18-foot section of the aircraft's roof had completely torn away, and critical documents and small items were now swirling out into the open sky. At this point, the plane was at 25,000 feet, where the air is so thin that breathing without oxygen masks is almost impossible. Under normal circumstances, sudden decompression triggers oxygen systems, allowing passengers to breathe through drop-down masks. But these oxygen units were mounted in the ceiling, now gone. Passengers in that exposed area had no oxygen and were pummeled by the relentless rush of wind. Fortunately, the seatbelt sign was still on, and since seatbelts are anchored to the lower structure of the plane, everyone remained securely in their seats. Had they not been strapped in, many would have been violently hurled into the open air and lost at sea. Quickly assessing the situation, First Officer Mimi handed control over to Captain Robert. He immediately realized that attempting to reach Honolulu was futile. The plane would likely break apart before they got anywhere close. Instead, he decided to attempt an emergency landing at Kahului Airport, directly below them. Passengers seated behind could not see exactly what was happening and believed the plane was spiraling out of control, causing even more panic. Mimi tried to contact Kahului Air Traffic Control, ATC, but initial attempts failed due to interference and noise. After about 3 minutes, she established a voice connection, but the roaring wind and chaos made it difficult for ATC to understand the situation. Nevertheless, ATC sensed the emergency. When Mimi transmitted the 7700 emergency code, ATC knew the plane was in grave danger. They immediately cleared the runway, positioning ambulances and fire trucks at the ready. About 7 minutes after the initial explosion, the plane descended to 10,000 feet, where the air pressure was more manageable. This allowed the passengers to breathe more easily, giving them a glimmer of hope that the pilots were still fighting to control the aircraft. Gradually, Flight 243 approached the Kahului Airport runway. At this critical juncture, one engine failed, but there was no time to worry about engine failure now. The priority was to land safely. Captain Robert maintained a safe speed, neither too slow to lose control nor too fast to risk a catastrophic landing. First Officer Mimi deployed the landing gear, but the cockpit indicator failed to confirm that the nose wheel was down. Both pilots were alarmed. If the nose gear hadn't deployed, the plane could split apart upon landing. They asked ATC to visually confirm, and from the ground, ATC reassured them that all 3 landing gear sets were indeed down. At 1:58 p.m., Captain Roberts successfully landed Flight 243 at Kahului Airport. Emergency crews rushed to the aircraft, swiftly transporting passengers to awaiting ambulances. Of the 90 passengers, 65 suffered serious injuries due to flying debris and oxygen deprivation. Yet miraculously, no passenger lost their life. Tragically, 58-year-old flight attendant C.B. Lansing, who had been serving at the time, was ejected from the aircraft and was never found. Subsequent investigations revealed a small crack in the aircraft's fuselage. A passenger had noticed it during boarding, but dismissed it as harmless. At high altitude, this minor crack expanded under immense pressure and tore the roof off. Operating for 19 years in a corrosive, humid, salt-filled environment had weakened the metal. Thorough inspections should have been conducted periodically, but were neglected. This incident taught aviation a critical lesson. Even the slightest oversight can lead to unimaginable catastrophes in the skies.